Hello, 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 everyone. Pastor George here with today's episode of A New Thing. And today, in this episode, we're going to find out what the X-Men, Wolverine, the Titanic, and the Bible all have in common. Or really how they're related. I bet you didn't know they were related. And let me tell you, the relation is not at all forced. It is incredibly strong. No, it is forced. But I do have a purpose for doing it. I guess I need to start out by just introducing you to who Wolverine is, because even though he's probably one of the most famous comic book superheroes, I understand that not everyone is always up to date on these types of things. So you might be familiar with how he looks because he's just such a famous looking guy. Sorry, that's our church's content page. All right, there we go. So that's what Wolverine looks like. You've probably seen him before. Kids dress up as him, Halloween and stuff like that. Has the very famous kind of phalanges on his eyes. He's part of the X-Men, so he's a mutant, which is a whole other thing. I could do one on the mutants sometimes. X-Men are pretty interesting. Besides that point, right? Wolverine, he has blades, his hands, looks cool. And another thing about him, which people of the comics know, but who are fans of the comics and the movies probably know, but if you don't, you wouldn't by just looking at him. But he also has a super healing factor. So, like, he can take a lot of damage and heal himself back. In fact, all these fan communities, like all these, maybe you've been on one before, I'm not sure, but like all these different fans of different things will make their own Wikipedias for whatever they like. So, like, on the Marvel Wikipedia, you can find, his name is James Howlett. You can find, also Logan, which is really how I know him. You can find all this different stuff about him, right? So, one of my favorites here is like, it looks like a Wikipedia page, right? It gives his height and his eye color and all this. But you can see right here, right? So it says cause of death. And it's like killed by Doctor Doom, killed by Thanos, a life force sucked out by Phoenix, self-sacrifice, killed by Gorgon, suffocation, burned to death, killed by Nimrod, die, aftermath of battle, killed by the progenitor, beheaded by the beast, right? So he like dies a bunch of times. And the thing that's interesting about Wolverine is that he actually really can't die. And this came up. The reason I'm talking about this is because I was out to lunch with someone from the church yesterday, and we were talking, and somehow Wolverine came up. Oh, the question was, we were talking about cryogenics. Cryogenics is that thing where people will freeze their bodies after they die with the hope that they'll be able to be revived in the future. And so there are these companies that set up, and they'll be like, yeah, you pay us. It seems like a scam, but you pay us like $30,000 and we'll store your body. We'll cryogenically freeze it. It might be more than that. I'm just saying a number. And then they'll do that, right? You'll die and they'll do that. And it's legal. It's generally considered pseudoscience. There's no guarantee that anything will bring you back. And so he was saying, the guy I was talking to, was what could you do if you could live forever? Obviously with the caveat that, Jesus will come back and things like that, right? That we're gonna live forever then, but like live forever on this side of glory, I should say. And I said, well, I don't think that's possible at all. And I used Wolverine as an example because he's a fake, obviously fictional character, because we're in the realm of fiction and we're talking about living forever. But I said, even if you were to not biologically die, like let's say they are able to stop aging, which is, I don't think, possible. Let's just say they're able to stop aging and your body's able to stay the same age, 27, for the rest of your life. You're still going to die at some point, right? And the reason I say that is because just by chance, you're going to get into some sort of accident or some sort of problem is going to happen and you're going to die. And I used Wolverine as an example because I remember one of my friends in high school saying, eventually Wolverine can live forever, right? He can survive all this stuff, but eventually he's just going to fall in a hole and can't get out. And just be stuck there forever. Because that is like, and what he's saying by that is he's just saying there's just a chance that these things happen, and there's just no way that you're, even if you can't like biologically die from disease or age or anything else, you're still going to eventually get into a situation where you're going to die, right? Where your brain function is going to cease. Car accident, bomb, some sort of natural thing. You go hiking one day, you fall off the side of a cliff, smack, right? All sorts of things can happen. In order to basically keep that from happening, you'd have to live in such a state where you're not really doing anything. And even then, I would say it's not a guarantee, right? And so, like, even like, he's even survived, like, nuclear bomb in the comics. Like, it's ridiculous. That happens in the movies, I think, too, right? But we don't have that ability to regenerate ourselves. So you're eventually going to die, right? Something is going to happen, and you're going to die. This is also why a lot of people who are like, well, we can store your, we could clone, or we could do all these other sorts of things. It's like, eventually death comes for everyone. And I think that people think of these things because they don't really want to face that reality, right? That death, there is no escaping it. And you can look at all sorts of great stories about that. Mask of the Red Death. Go read Edgar Allan Poe. But the reason I wanted to talk about this is I wanted to look at Ecclesiastes. So Ecclesiastes, also called Kohelet, which is its Hebrew name, is a book that happens in the New Testament. It's considered a wisdom book. So along with Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Job are kind of the three big wisdom books of the Old Testament. There are wisdom psalms as well, but all of the point of wisdom is basically teaching you how to live, and what it means. And they actually are all kind of in dialogue with each other, because the way that Proverbs presents it, although this isn't entirely always true, but the way that Proverbs presents it is that, if you do good things will happen. Ecclesiastes takes the opposite view of that, and Job is kind of in the middle of the two. And I think that's God's way of communicating that it's complicated, about what it means to live a good life and what the benefits of living a good life are. But Ecclesiastes is famous for these opening lines. So this is what it is. It's chapter 1, verses 1 through 2. It says, "The words of the teacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless." So, traditionally, this has been attributed to Solomon, because it says son of David, king in Jerusalem. Although, I will say there's debate about what exactly that means. In any case, it's written, the majority of it anyway, is written by someone called the teacher, the Kohelet, which is why it gets its name in Ecclesiastes as Kohelet. Why it's called Ecclesiastes in English, that's a great question. All I know is Ecclesiastes has to do with the church, because ecclesia is church, or ecclesia is an assembly. So I have no idea why it's called Ecclesiastes, but oh, I guess one of the translations for this is leader of the assembly, which is why. Okay, so that's why it's called Ecclesiastes. Thanks NIV for citing that. I appreciate that. I always was taught Kohelet meant teacher or philosopher or someone like that, but I guess it can mean leader of the assembly. That's pretty cool. All right, that's where it gets its name. Problem solved. So anyway, starts off, meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. So that word, hevel in Hebrew, it's like smoke or vapor. So it's like you can see it, but you can't grasp it. That type of thing. So it's vanity. So you sometimes see this as translated vanity, vanity, everything is vanity. Basically, everything is stuff that you can see, but if you grasp it, it goes away, saying it's temporary, right? It's not there forever. And that's really the whole point of Ecclesiastes. So Ecclesiastes 9, 1 through 12 is the part I really wanted to focus on. So this is what it says. It says, "So I reflected on all this." He's talking about all the things he's seen, people try and do different things, stuff like that. "And concluded that the righteous and the wise and what they do are in God's hands, but no one knows whether love or hate awaits them. All share a common destiny, the righteous and the wicked, the good and the bad, the clean and the unclean, those who offer sacrifices and those who don't. As it is with the good, so with the sinful. As it is with those who take oaths, so with those who are afraid to take them. So here he gives a bunch of different types of people, the good, the bad, and the clean, the unclean, like these things. And you would assume that the good, the clean, the ones who offer sacrifices are going to be better off somehow, but he says no, right? They all go to the same place. He says, this is the evil in everything that happens under the sun. The same destiny overtakes all. The hearts of people, moreover, are full of evil, and there is madness in their hearts while they live, and afterward they join the dead. Anyone who is among the living has hope. Even a live dog is better than a dead lion. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no further reward, and even their name is forgotten. Their love, their hate, and their jealousy have long since vanished. Never again will they have a part in anything that happens under the sun. Go eat your food with gladness and drink your wine with joyful heart, for God has already approved what you do. Always be clothed in white, and always anoint your head with oil. Enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of this meaningless life that God has given you under the sun, all your meaningless days. For this is your lot in life, and your toilsome labor under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. For in the realm of the dead, where you are going, there is neither working, nor planning, nor knowledge, nor wisdom. I have seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift, or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the learned. Time and chance happen to them all. Moreover, no one knows when their hour will come. As fish are caught in a cruel net, or birds taken in by a snare, so the people are trapped by evil times that fall unexpectedly upon them. So here, right, like this is Ecclesiastes 9, 1 through 12 is really the summary of the whole book, in my opinion. Like, this is what it all kind of leads up to. This is his point. His point throughout this whole thing is that everything that people normally chase after is not going to make you any better than anyone else, that it's all meaningless because at the end of the day you're going to die. And in the view of this author, death is kind of the end of all things. Like, clearly there's life after death, but like it's not as good or not as seen as good as being this life. And that makes sense because this is pre-Christ, right? So there is a certain misunderstanding or not knowledge of like what that is, and I could see that, in some sort of gray realm why you would not want that, right? But this is an understanding of kind of the brass tacks of it. And this made me think, especially with this time and chance bit, is that this is what it comes down to, right? We talk about Wolverine. Eventually you're going to die. You're going to be caught in some sort of situation, and you're going to die. Now, for most of us, that's old age and failing health that eventually kill us, right? And that is time and chance. You don't know exactly when that's going to happen. Anyone who's been with anyone through this, you know that it's very middling for a while, and then something random will happen, and that'll kind of spell the end, right? That's just how it goes. And we don't know when that's going to happen because we don't have control over it. And one of the things this made me think of is this, the Titanic, right? Which I'm pretty sure anyone could point out just based on the look alone, right? It's such a famous ship. Obviously famous because it sank, but famous for just the human story. I've been I've been listening to a podcast about the Titanic and just all the human stories that are on it. It was really, really good. Probably going to finish it later today. But in it, it jogged my memory, or it didn't jog my memory, but it connected this to me for what we're talking about. Because on the Titanic, there are so many what-if stories in this. And I'm not talking about, like, what if they didn't hit the iceberg. I'm talking about individual lives, right, that were either lost or were not lost based on complete time and chance. So one of the stories they shared at the beginning, it's like 6 episodes, so one of the first episodes, they share the stories of some crew members. And working on ships like this sucked. It was terrible. So people enjoyed it. It was good pay, I think, generally. But basically, when you aren't, it was work hard, party hard. So before the ship is about to take off, a bunch of the crew members just go on a pub crawl. Very British thing to do. They go on a pub crawl, and they get drunk, and they realize that they aren't going to make it back to the ship, or it's getting close. So there's like 5 of them, and they all run back to the ship. Two of them, there's a train coming on a crossing. So two of them go, hey, we need to go. They jump it, like they jump before the train comes by. The other three wait. They get there, they get on board. The train is long, it's a passenger train, so it takes a while. The other three eventually are able to cross. They get there, but they're too late. And they could still get on, but the guy who controls the gangway, one of the guys, officers on watch or whatever, says, no, you guys aren't here on time, you're unreliable. And this is one of those, this is the time when it was tough to find work all the time, right? And you could be fired really quickly. And there's just people that wait around to see if you need help, and they'll join up. And so he just brings three of those other guys on to fill the spots of the guys who were there late. And those three guys that were there late obviously don't get on the ship, don't die. All the three guys that were just standing around waiting for work get on, they all die, right? Just because a train came by. That's time and chance, right? Of course, in our lives, we only see the things around us. And so it's tough for us to always see time and chance unless it's in the rearview mirror. In the moment, we don't know, you know, if I took a left down that road, I would have gotten smashed by a tractor trailer. But I took a right. Like, we just take a right and go on our merry way, that sort of thing, right? We aren't aware of this. This is one of the really interesting things about studying history that I really love, is just seeing these small moments in human lives. Another example is the one of the Goldsmith family, which were a bunch of people. I believe they were traveling in the third class. And they were going across the Atlantic to try and make something of themselves in the United States. They're from the UK, they're British. And one of them is on the trip is a 15-year-old boy. And he turns 16 the last day of the Titanic, the 15th, I think. And one of the gifts that you would get when you became a man back in the day would be pants, because in the UK, especially, and in Europe, this is still kind of the rule. I don't know if it's in the UK, but I know it's kind of a rule in Europe, is that shorts are generally seen as something boys wear. Pants are seen as something that men wear. So he was given a pair of pants on the day of his 16th birthday, which he's officially become a man, the last day of the Titanic. And if you know anything about the Titanic, you can probably guess what that means for him. That means that he doesn't get on one of the lifeboats. And that's just because he's a man. Like, you know, that was it. It was men stay on the ship, women and children go in different ways that was interpreted by some of the crew members. But in any case, he doesn't get on. And he dies. And that's pure chance, right? That's just pure chance. There's nothing that you can do to control that sort of thing. He just happened to have that birthday at that time. And so the Titanic is a really good example of that, just because this is so well documented and there's so many stories that are so resonating with a lot of people. But all that's just to say is that what Ecclesiastes says, I think, is really true. When the Kohelet, when the teacher, when the leader of the assembly, whatever you want to call it, says in verse 11 here, right? The race is not to the swift, so the fastest people don't always win. The battle to the strongest people don't always win. Nor does food come to the wise, so the wise people aren't always rewarded, like with money or food. Or wealth to the brilliant, same idea. Or favor to the learned, right? Maybe the people who are smartest don't actually get the places that they deserve. Time and chance happen to them all. And I think that's really true. Now, the thing about the book of Ecclesiastes is it presents a very cynical view of life. I'm sure you saw that in verse 9 here, right? So there's two authors in Ecclesiastes. One who's the main author, and then we have the editor, who begins and ends the book. In the beginning, all he says is the words of the teacher, son of David, king of Jerusalem. That's all he says. At the end of the book, he gives us a little bit more. So this is what he says. He says, not only was the teacher wise, but he also imparted knowledge to the people. He pondered and searched out and set in order many proverbs. The teacher searched to find just the right words, and what he wrote was upright and true. The words of the wise are like goads, their collected sayings like firmly embedded nails given by one shepherd. Be warned, my son, of anything in addition to them. Of the making of many books there is no end, and much study wearies the body. Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. And that's how the book ends. Now, here he says, right, is he ends it, and he doesn't say that everything is meaningless. What he says is, he says a lot of the stuff that this guy wrote is really good and helpful. It's wise. But his ultimate takeaway, and the ultimate takeaway of Ecclesiastes, because the editor has included this, is that what Ecclesiastes wrote, whoever the author was, is helpful, but it's not the entire story, right? You shouldn't ignore it just because you don't like it, right? Because what this does is it makes you think and it changes you. So you have to do that, just like, you have to goad people, right? That's the good thing about Ecclesiastes, is it tells you what to do, and it gets you thinking, just like what I'm saying now. But also, you can't just stay here and study this and find life in these words, because that's not what's going to happen, right? You find life in keeping God's commandments, doing your duties, and knowing that God will bring justice for everything, because if you read Ecclesiastes, it might not seem that way. So here, right, even in the book itself, I said earlier that it's not a complete vision, and even it's acknowledged in the book itself that it's not a complete vision. But these words of this guy, of the teacher, are still incredibly helpful, so we should care about them. And ultimately, though, right, time and chance in an atheistic world, that would be just the end of it, right? But the interesting thing is that in a Christian world, we also know that God is in control. And that's the world we live in. So, for instance, Proverbs 19:21, another one of the wisdom books, says, "Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails." And that's, I think, ultimately how you would understand all of this together, right? Is that what seem like time and chance to us, and only time and chance, are all part of the Lord's plan. Now, of course, that leads to difficulties. Why do certain things happen? Things like that. But I think that this should give us some sort of interest or hope in understanding that why these things happen, right? Why that kid turned 16, why those guys missed the train, is all in the Lord's plan. And that we might not understand that, but we also usually don't look at the reverse of that. All the good things in our life, right? Because there's nothing that guarantees good. And I think that's the positive reason of Ecclesiastes, right? Usually it's taken in the negative, but I would flip it. And what I would say is, well, there's no reason why, let's say you're one of the people that missed and you go, wow, thank goodness I wasn't on the Titanic, right? Wow, what luck. It's like nothing that you did deserved that, right? So just as like God's hand led some people onto the Titanic where they would die, it also took people away. In the same way that you take left instead of right, and that changes some things, that didn't have to happen that way. I think often in our lives we think we're owed the best possible outcome, which is not the case at all. And so, like, there's nothing that in our lives that we should take for granted, and understand that the Lord hands out all of these things. And that's why, Job is able to say, which is why Job is really a mix of Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, where it says, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. I just, all these different conversations kind of came up, and they're so funny because, they're completely unrelated, but in my mind, I was connecting the dots. So hopefully you saw that. Hopefully it wasn't too much of a rush. I was really close to just being like, hey, let me tell you about the Titanic. But I was like, that has nothing to do with the Bible. It's just incredibly interesting. So anyway, I will see you guys on Sunday for worship. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. Peace out.